Rainy days don't seem so wet. Stormy nights don't stay. From the moment that we met, you were worth the wait. Oh, this could be the best thing that I'll ever know. Best thing that I'll ever know.
Hello, hello, hello. So today, I'll tell you this again when I start the video, because I videoed most of today's show. I ran out of time because after getting back from getting my face done and doing the research for this, the deep dive into it and everything, I have one video that I didn't have time to upload into the video that I was making. So before we get too far, how many of you watched the America's Most Wanted last night? I watched it on Clutch Them Pearls because Justin was covering it, and I was disappointed. I really must say I was disappointed. Okay, I knew it would only be a short segment, maybe 4 or 5 minutes long, but they only let Seth speak 2 or 3 sentences, and they didn't tell the truth. But the one good thing from it is nearly everybody on that panel stated that they thought it was foul play. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot the word. Okay. Please excuse my face. I went in this morning and had cancer removed right here. You can see it's still puffy and swollen. And I had cancer removed right here, and then it jumped over to this side. So he zapped it over on this side too. And my nose is like 3 times its normal size. And it's wanting to run, and I can't put a tissue over the top of it to blow it. And it's driving me nuts. But they said it would blister. Then it will scab over. I'm not supposed to pop the blister, but it'll scab over. But a friend of mine told me to get vitamin E oil, the kind that you poke with the pen and squeeze out on your finger and rub. And I asked the doctor about that, and he said I can use that on it. And I go back on the 1st for a follow-up. So, there we go. 1, 2, 3 skin cancers removed from my face. So that's why I look horrible. I can't put makeup over them to cover them up because it could cause infection. So I don't wear makeup anyway. But, all right. So let's do a share screen here. Here's our fair use disclaimer. Actually got one that's readable this time. The copyright laws, the recognized fair use copyright section 107 of copyright states, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we'll drop this down, and then we will get in to the video that I made 30 minutes ago, or finished making 30 minutes ago. because there's a lot of reading in the beginning of it, and I didn't want my throat to crack up or break up or something. Or for me to go into a yawning fit. I don't know what it is. Every time I go live, I go into a yawning fit. Okay, so here we go. Got it full. Do I have it full screen? Well, I guess it's as full screen as it's going to get. Fair use disclaimer. Well, it's my video, but I recorded somebody else's video, and the links to all the places I recorded a video are in the description of this video. I wanted to know if there was a line where true crime and paranormal cross. Where are the crosshairs? And so I went on Grok, and I found a story that happened back in 1897. But hello, whoever came in to chat, please hit the thumbs up. Put a number 1 in chat, please, if you think that the story last night on America's Most Wanted about Sebastian was disappointing. Please. The story that I'm reading is from January the 18th of 2011. And when you think it was please excuse my face. I had cancer removed right there, and then it spread, and he removed one over there because it jumped when it was weird. It was like it just popped up there. So he said, we're going to zap that one too. So he said, what word did he use? He said, I just gave you frostbite. So, and I'll tell you what, when that started thawing out, it felt like electricity going, and I'm not supposed to touch it. I can start putting hello, Marley 13 and Amanda Panda. Vitamin E oil on it to keep it from scarring real bad. And so I asked him about it. My friend suggested it, and I've had the vitamin E for a while and been using it. So I'm going to continue to use it. So, okay. But I did find a case. It's called the Greenbrier Ghost. And this first part comes from a little bit of history, blog post, and the links in my description. The Greenbrier Ghost, Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Entered in nearby cemetery is Zona Heaster Shue. Her death in 1897 was presumed natural until her spirit appeared to her mother to describe how she was killed by her husband, Edward. Autopsy on the exhumed body, so that means they dug the body up, verified. I used my kidney. Figure that one out. By the apparition's account, Edward, found guilty of murder, was sentenced to the state prison. Only known case in which testimony from a ghost helped convict an unaliver. And I'll show you a picture. Just a second. Right here is the marker that's that's near the cemetery. Well, I accidentally closed that page. Can you imagine? Why would I do that? Anyway, I did. So we're going to switch over to the next story is from Wikipedia. And it says it's the free encyclopedia. The link is also in my description. And it says the Greenbrier Ghost is the name properly given to the ghost of Zona Heaster Shue, a young woman in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, United States, who was unalived in 1897. Initially judged by death by natural causes. The court later declared that the woman had been unalived by her husband, following testimony by the victim's mother, Mary Jane Hester, in which she claims that her daughter's spirit revealed the true cause of death. Are you saying that whenever your time comes, that you're going to come back to me in this way and I can have your husband convicted? I just want to see you. I don't care what you tell me when you come back. I just want to see you. You better come back more than 4 times, too. Come back every day. In October 1896, Elva Zona Heaster, who went by her middle name Zona, met a blacksmith named Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue. Wow. And married him soon afterwards, taking his surname. On January 23, 1897, Zona was found unalived in her home. The case of unaliving was listed as childbirth. She was buried on January 24, 1890. What was her first problem? Or mistake. What was her first mistake? Taking his surname? In the local cemetery, now known as the Soul Chapel Methodist Cemetery. Her mother, Mary Jane Hester, later claimed to have seen Zona's ghost at her bedside, according to Mary Jane's story. Zona insisted that Erasmus had unalived her. The exhumation and autopsy. The exhumation and autopsy, armed with the story allegedly told to her by the ghost, Mary Jane Hester visited the local prosecutor, John Alfred Preston, and spent several hours in his office convincing him to reopen the matter of her daughter's unaliving. Whether he believed her story of the ghost is unknown, but he did have enough doubt to dispatch deputies to re-interview several people of interest in the case, including Dr. Knapp. He was likely responding to public sentiment, as numerous locals had begun suggesting that Zona had been unalived. Preston himself went to speak to Dr. Knapp, who stated that he had not made a complete examination of the body. This was viewed as sufficient justification for an autopsy, and an exhumation was ordered and an inquest by jury formed. Zona's body was examined on February 22, 1897, in the local one-room schoolhouse. The autopsy lasted 3 hours and found that Zona's neck had been broken, according to the report published on March 9, 1897. The discovery was made that the neck was broken and the windpipe smashed on the throat were the marks of Sorry, at that moment a cat had come up right here and it wasn't my cat. So I was where the marks of fingers indicating that she had been choked. The neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebrae. The alignments were torn and ruptured. The windpipe had been crushed at the point in front of the neck. She was arrested and charged with the unaliving of his wife. The trial. Erasmus Shue was held in the jail in Lewisburg while waiting for the trial to begin. During this time, more information about his past was coming to light. He had been married twice before. His first marriage had ended in divorce, with his wife accusing him of great cruelty. His second wife had passed away under mysterious circumstances less than a year after they were married. Zona was his third wife, and she began to talk of wishing to wed 7. Mandapania, are you sure that's not your father-in-law or mother-in-law? I'm sorry. That's rude. Women. He freely spoke to this. You get the inside joke there. In jail, and told reporters that he was sure he would be let free because there was so little evidence against him. The trial began on June 22, 1897, and Mary Jane Hester was Preston's star witness. He confined his questioning to the known facts of the case, skirting the issue of her ghostly sightings, perhaps hoping to prove her unreliable. Shue's lawyer questioned her. Mrs. Hester Shue's lawyer questioned Mrs. Hester extensively about her daughter's visits on cross-examination. The tactic backfired when Mrs. Hester would not waver in her account, despite intense badgering. As the defense had introduced the issue, the judge found it difficult to instruct the jury to disregard the story of the ghost, and many people in the community seemed to believe it. Consequently, Shue was found guilty of unaliving on July 11th and sentenced to life in prison. However, the Greenbrier ghost was never mentioned by the prosecution and played no part in the case against Shue. A lynch mob was formed to take him from the jail and hang him, but the mob was disbanded by the deputy sheriff before any damages was done. 4 of the mob's organizers later faced charges for their actions. The aftermath. Erasmus Shue died on March 13, 1900 in West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville. The victim of an unknown epidemic, he was buried in an unmarked grave in the local cemetery. State historical marker. The state of West Virginia has erected a state historical marker near the cemetery in which Zona Shue was buried. It reads, Entered in nearby cemetery is Zona Heaster Shue. Her death in 1897 was presumed natural until her spirit appeared to her mother to describe how she was unalived by her husband Edward. Autopsy on the exhumed body verified the apparition's account. Edward, found guilty, was sentenced to the state prison. Only known case in which testimony from a ghost helped convict a murderer. In popular culture, Thomas Critchfield, professor at Illinois State University, made E.Z.H. Shue a co-author for a behavior Okay. The reason I skipped that was because I was going into all the credits and stuff about it and didn't realize it, and I just kept on reading. So now I'm going to go into a couple of videos that I found. Oh, maybe I need to put some music on. All right, we'll go back to Tico Tico, Against All Odds. that too loud? And turn it around here. What she looks like. This is Zona right here, and down here, this is their home where they lived in West Virginia, where the unaliving took place. And next we're going to come to, hold please. All right, now I'm going to go to, this is the Greenbrier Ghost in West Virginia history.
States. West Virginia is a state known for its scenic vistas and mountain views, but it could be just as well known for its unique history. For example, it was in West Virginia that the...
Okay, I forgot to tell you this is by, it's by thewonderfulwestvirginia.com. So let's come back up here. And the links to it is in my description. This, because I don't need this part. There we go. I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong.
The United States built a bunker that was designed to protect the United States Congress in the case of nuclear war. That more than 100,000 square foot facility built more than 700 feet below the Greenbrier Hotel in Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, was completed in 1961 and remained active clear until the 1990s when the Washington Post revealed its existence and it was decommissioned. And there is another piece of nearly forgotten American history that also occurred in Greenbrier County, this one in the 1890s. Because the curious story of one of the only known trials in history to include the testimony of a ghost deserves to be remembered. West Virginia joined the Union during the Civil War, splitting from the rest of Virginia, which joined the Confederacy. However, the people living in what would become West Virginia desired separate statehood long before that fatal break. There were differences in ethnicity and views about what constituted appropriate taxation and government representation, among other issues. About 1/3 of the population of Virginia lived in its western counties. When the Virginia legislature voted to secede from the Union in 1861, the overall vote was 88 to 55. Of the 55 dissenters, 29 of the representatives were from West Virginia. In response to the vote and outraged at the result, 2 conventions were held in Wheeling, in which a separate pro-Union government was elected. The new governor was Francis H. Pierpont, and he made the new state capital of what was called the restored government of Virginia in Wheeling, later moving it to Alexandria. In April the following year, a referendum was held, both upholding the new government and putting forth a resolution to split from the rest of Virginia. The vote was extremely popular, with a final vote of 18,862 to 514. President Abraham Lincoln wrote to Pierpont advising, "Make haste slowly. Things are improving by time. Draw up your proclamation carefully, and if you please, let me see it before issuing." The vote in the U.S. Congress to allow statehood ran along party lines, but the formation of West Virginia was approved. There was some concern about slavery in the new state, as Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation specifically only applied to those states in rebellion against the Union. But a senator named Wakeman Wiley, one of the founders of West Virginia and a slave owner himself, crafted an amendment creating gradual emancipation for the slaves within the proposed state's counties. That amendment was approved by the voters, and statehood went forward. On April 20th, 1863, Abraham Lincoln announced that West Virginia would become a state after a 60-day waiting period. On June 20th, the 35th state joined the Union. Zelma Zona Heaster was born in West Virginia in 1873, and years after its formation. Not much is known about her life other than what survives the oral tradition. She was a bit of a free spirit for the time period, having a child out of wedlock in 1895. The next year, Zona met a blacksmith by the name of Erasmus Scribbling Shue, who was going by the name of Edward, but people in the town called him Trout. Shue was more than a decade older than Zona. They had a whirlwind courtship and married in November 1896. By all accounts, the couple seemed to be happy and in love. However, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Robinson Heaster, reportedly had her doubts, both about the man and the short courtship. Then, in January the next year, an 11-year-old neighbor who helped Zona around the house discovered her body at the foot of the stairs in her home. Reports from the time described the scene. The body was lying stretched out, perfectly straight, with feet together, one hand lying by the side and the other lying across the body. The head was slightly inclined to one side. He ran home to tell his mother, who summoned the doctor, police, and Edward Shue. By the time the doctor, George Knapp, got to the house, Shue had already taken his wife's body to a bedroom and dressed her for burial. He was cradling Zona's head and shoulders in his arms and rocking with grief. Knapp made a brief examination and declared Zona's death was due to an everlasting faint, what more modern doctors call a heart attack. According to some reports, the doctor later changed the cause of death to complications due to pregnancy, but Zona hadn't told anybody that she was pregnant and wasn't showing any signs of pregnancy at the time. He dressed his deceased bride in a high.
If that doesn't shoot red flag, I don't know anything that will. When even the coroner changes the cause of death without doing an autopsy or nothing, or examining the body.
Colored dress himself. This was a break with tradition, as women from the community would usually prepare a body for burial. He placed her body in a coffin, and Zona's remains were transported to her mother, Mary Jane Heaster's home, which was a few miles away on Big Sewell Mountain. Oddly, during the viewing of Zona's body, Shue did not leave his wife's side, remaining close to her casket and grieving, seeming to keep mourners from viewing the body too closely. But Mary Heaster did not trust Trout Shue, and she did not believe that her daughter had simply dropped dead of a heart attack. She began to pray that her daughter's spirit would return and tell her how she died. Some 4 weeks after her daughter's funeral, Mary said she began to have visions at night of Zona's spirit. 4 nights in a row, Mary said her child appeared to her and claimed she had been abused by Shue. Zona's spirit said Shue was abusive. She said he had choked her, crushing her windpipe and breaking the top vertebrae in her neck. Mary said one night, as her daughter's spirit departed, Zona turned her head completely around, displaying the damage that had been done to her physical body. At first, no one believed Mary's ghostly tale, thinking it was simply a mother's grief, but Mary convinced her neighbors and her brother of its truth, and together they approached a lawyer named John Alfred Preston. He didn't believe Mary right away, but after Preston spoke to Dr. Knapp, who said that he had not closely examined Zona's body, and some of the neighbors described Shue's strange behavior at the visitation, he obtained a warrant to exhume Zona's body for an autopsy. The body was exhumed on February 22nd, 1897. Shue was required to attend the autopsy, though he protested. According to oral tradition, he said, "But they will not be able to prove that I did it." A later story, printed by the Monroe Watchman newspaper, said Shue sat whittling on a stick while his wife's body was examined. It reported, he seemed unconcerned until the doctor started working around her neck, and Shue showed signs of extreme nervousness. Shockingly, the story purportedly told by Zona's ghost about her cause of death was confirmed. The autopsy showed that her neck had been broken and her windpipe crushed, showing that she had been strangled. Edward Trout Shue was arrested for his wife's murder. The trial took place in June 1897. Prosecutors didn't want Mary to speak about her ghostly visions, but the defense asked about them, hoping to discredit her. But Mary stuck to her story and insisted it was true, and it was compelling. Judge J.W. McWhirter, who presided over the trial, described Mary's testimony on the stand in a letter to a friend after the event. McWhirter wrote what Mary claimed her daughter told her on the third night of her appearance. "I told him supper was ready, and he began to chide me because I had prepared no meat for supper. And I reminded him that there was plenty. There was bread and butter, applesauce, preserves, and other things that made a very good supper. And he flew mad and got up and came towards me. When I raised up, he seized each side of my head with his hand, and by a sudden wrench, dislocated my neck." The judge went on to relate how Mary had kept a sheet that had been wadded around Zona's neck in her coffin, but it began to smell, and when she washed it, a red liquid oozed out inside the sheet. The sheet was displayed in court, and the judge said it was a decidedly reddish color. The reporter said that he had never been to Zona's home, and neither had Mary. But Zona's spirit described the place in such detail that when he spoke to a friend about its location, based on Mary's testimony alone, they believed he had been there. Finally, he wrote that Shue had been heard to say that he wanted to be married 7 times in his life. It was revealed during the trial that Shue had been married twice before his final marriage to Zona. His first wife divorced him and listed in the court documents that he had been abusive. Shue's second wife died under mysterious circumstances within a year of their nuptials. One story said she had fallen through ice. Another suggests she died when Shue accidentally dropped a brick on her head as they built a chimney. And it was revealed that between the two marriages, Shue had spent 2 years in prison for stealing a horse. Shue took the stand in his own defense during the proceedings. A local newspaper, the Greenbrier Independent, reported he admitted that he had served a turn in the pan, declared that he dearly loved his wife, and appealed to the jury to look into his face and then say if he was guilty. His testimony, manner, and so forth made an unfavorable impression on the spectators. He denied the circumstantial evidence arrayed against him, but the jury was convinced otherwise. The trial only lasted 8 days, and deliberations went on for a little more than an hour. Judge McWhirler could not instruct the jury to ignore the testimony about the ghost because it had been brought up by the defense, not the prosecution. Shue was found guilty of first-degree murder. Most of the jury thought he deserved the death penalty, but it was not unanimous, so he was instead sentenced to life in prison. Following the trial in July, a lynch mob formed to hang Shue, but authorities heard about the mob and the sheriff was able to protect him by hiding him in the woods. Shue was said to be so terrified of the mob that he was unable to tie his own shoes. The sheriff confronted the mob and persuaded them to lay down their arms and go home. 4 of them were later indicted for attempted lynching. Shue was imprisoned at the state prison in Moundsville. He died of an unknown epidemic that went through the prison population in March 1900 and was buried in an unmarked grave. Mary Hester maintained throughout the rest of her life that she had been visited by her daughter's ghost. She died in September 1916. Of course, people still argue whether Edward Shue was guilty, but it's rather amazing that Zona Shue's actual cause of death was uncovered. Still, it's hard to believe that as late as 1897 that a U.S. jury took the testimony of a ghost as credible evidence, although it was supported by a strong circumstantial case. On U.S. Highway 60, in front of Sam Black Church in West Virginia, there's a sign commemorating Zona Shue. It reads in part, "Interred in nearby cemetery is Zona Heaster Shue. Her death was presumed to be natural until her spirit visited her mother to describe how she had been killed by her husband, Edward." I hope you enjoyed this episode of the History Guy.
Murders and missing persons. Thus far, that has been the primary.
I forgot to hit record when I was telling you I was switching videos and who was playing this video. Oops.
Focus of Mysterious WV to help shed light on these foundering cases and maybe, just maybe, help law enforcement to bring them to a success.
Amanda Panda, I believe I agree with you. It is insane, but it would be so cool at the same time. I mean, if you didn't know how your child had, if you didn't know the cause of their unaliving and your child was able to come back and tell you how it happened, and you could get your attorney and the jury and everybody to believe you, that would just be so amazing. I mean, I'm going to look for more cases like this. Do you like this kind of case?
Successful conclusion. With our style and methodology now firmly established, we felt that the time was right to extend our documentation into other areas. And with Halloween fast approaching, we simply could not resist the temptation to present to you our first video feature dealing with the paranormal. Just one of the many things that help to make the great state of West Virginia mysterious. Our first foray into the world of the paranormal takes us back to rural Greenbrier County, just before the turn of the 20th century. A time when the horrors of the Civil War had finally faded, only to be replaced by a diabolical crime and a tale of a ghostly encounter so utterly fantastic that it found its way not only into the pages of the local and national newspapers, but into the law books as well. Greenbrier County, West Virginia, lies in the southeastern section of the state, directly astride the spine of the great Appalachian Mountains. Then, as today, a mostly pastoral locale, destined to be only lightly scarred by the mad rush for coal which was only just beginning to grip the nation. It was one of those idyllic settings that one tends to associate more with a Norman Rockwell painting than a tale of murder and betrayal. However, in January of 1897, the blissfulness of these tranquil surroundings was to be shattered, and within the span of only 6 months, the deeply held beliefs of many of its most pious inhabitants would be shaken to their very foundations. A little less than a year before this great upheaval, a man by the name of Erasmus Stribling Shue, an itinerant blacksmith by trade, arrived in the county. Shue came from the Droop Mountain section of neighboring Pocahontas County. He stated to many of the locals that he hoped to start his life anew in Greenbrier County. In short order, Shue found work as a blacksmith at the shop of James Crookshanks and moved into a 2-story frame home formerly occupied by the late William M. Livesey. Although he was considered friendly and hard-working, widespread rumors about Shue's past managed to follow him across the county line. The details have been fuzzied by the passage of time, but Shue had apparently been married twice before his arrival in Greenbrier County. One account, given in the 1960s, states that his 2 previous wives had died under circumstances that were not exactly commonplace. One in a fall from a haystack, and the other having been struck by a falling brick from a chimney that Shue himself was in the process of repairing. It was also rumored that Shue had once served time in prison for stealing a horse, at the time the equivalent of grand theft auto. However, even such unsavory gossip was not enough to dissuade the feelings of an attractive 22-year-old girl named Zona Heaster. Hester lived with her mother, Mary Hester, in or near the town of Crawley, about 14 miles away from Shue's residence in Livesey Mill. At the time, Zona Hester's own reputation had also been the subject of vicious local gossip. Sometime in 1895, Zona Hester reportedly fathered a child out of wedlock, and no marriage appeared to be imminent. No one quite knows why Zona was drawn so powerfully to Shue. Genuine affection? Or perhaps it was a combination of empathy, shame, and the fear of possibly being forever ostracized from the community that drove Zona to the arms of Shue.
Right here.
Whatever the motivation or reason, Hester and Shue were married in Greenbrier County in October of 1896. Zona's mother, Mary, was not shy in expressing her deeply felt disapproval of the match. It would not take long for her misgivings to appear justified. Not long after Christmas, Zona Shue fell mysteriously ill. Dr. George Knapp, whose name was to become inexorably linked to the entire affair, was called. Knapp examined Zona on several occasions, but was unable to conclusively diagnose her affliction. As the weeks went by, Zona's condition did not improve and seemed to grow steadily worse. Some speculated that Zona was again with child. Local residents took note that Shue seemed to willingly take on the role of a doting husband and did what he could to care for his wife, or so it seemed. On the morning of January 22, 1897, Shue, who had come to be known locally as Trout, left home as usual for his nearby blacksmith shop. Departing from his normal routine, Trout stopped at the nearby home of Martha Jones, Jones, known in the community as Aunt Martha. Trout reportedly told Jones that Zona was under the weather that morning and asked if her son Andrew could possibly collect the eggs at his home and then help Zona with some chores. Martha Jones agreed, but for reasons that remain unknown, Andrew Jones did not go directly to the Shue residence. Shue reportedly returned to Jones' home on 3 additional occasions that morning, repeating his request that Andrew go to his home to assist his wife. Reports on this vary, but Andrew Jones apparently arrived at the Shue residence sometime between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Receiving no answer to repeated knocks at the front door, Andrew Jones entered the Shue home and was met with a horrifying sight. Lying on the floor before him was the lifeless body of Zona Shue. According to Jones, Zona's body was positioned with her feet together, one arm at her side, the other lying across her stomach, and her head slightly tilted to one side. Andrew quickly fled and reported what he had found to both his mother as well as Trout Shue. Martha and Trout quickly ran to the Shue home, apparently arriving at virtually the same time.
Is it just me, or does it look like there's a face right there? Do you see it? Looks like there's a face right there.
At some point around this time, Dr. Knapp was also sent for and arrived at the Shue home approximately 1 hour later. Upon his arrival, Dr. Knapp was dismayed to find that the body of Zona Shue had not only been moved from the spot where it was found, but had also been redressed and laid out as if already prepared for burial. This seemed quite odd to Knapp, as it was customary at the time for the remains of a deceased female to be prepped for viewing and burial by the female members of the community, and after any necessary inquest or autopsy had been completed. Setting aside his initial bewilderment, Dr. Knapp made some rudimentary attempts at resuscitation, but quickly ascertained that the situation was well beyond hope. The body was already cold and quite obviously lifeless. Knapp noted some slight discoloration on Zona Shue's right cheek and neck. However, when he began to loosen the tight high collar to allow for a closer examination, Trout Shue protested and angrily demanded Knapp to stop. Perhaps intimidated by Shue's imposing nature, Dr. Knapp ceased his examination. Zona Shue's body was soon laid out in its casket in her home.
I've never seen a casket that the front opened like that so you could see the full body laying there. That's a very pretty casket. I've never seen one like that.
Home for viewing and visitation. Those who came to pay their respects later recalled that Trout Shue never left the head of his wife's casket and placed rolled-up sections of cloth on either side of her head in a manner that he stated would have been comfortable for her. Following the wake, Zona Shue's remains were transported over Sewell Mountain to Crawley. Zona Heaster Shue was laid to rest in what was then the Sewell Chapel Cemetery. Dr. Knapp initially attributed her death to heart failure, although when the official entry was made in the county death...
Wasn't that so pretty? I bet that's a $3,000 casket. Now. I mean, then it wouldn't have been, but now, golly.
Register, the cause of death had been changed to childbirth. For most, this seemed to be the sad end to a pitiful affair. No one could have possibly known that it was merely the conclusion of Act 1 in what would soon unfold into the most bizarre 3-act play the young state of West Virginia had yet witnessed. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester, refused to accept the official cause of death. Having never trusted Trout Shue, she felt that something was just not right with the series of events leading to her daughter's demise. In particular, she wondered why Shue had been so quick to dress and prepare Zona's body for burial, and why so much attention had been paid to comforting her head. In addition to this, Hester, with Trout Shue's blessings, had removed a white sheet from Zona's coffin prior to her interment. Days later, she noted that the garment was giving off a foul-smelling odor. When placed into a wash basin, the water in the basin inexplicably turned red, and the sheet faded to a shade of pink, which then seemed to refuse any further attempts at cleansing. Having little else to go on but her own suspicions and intuition, Mary Jane Hester did what came natural to her, turned to prayer. For nearly 4 weeks, it seemed as though no one in either heaven, hell, or the here and now was listening. Then, one night in February, events reportedly took an abrupt turn to the supernatural. Mary Jane Hester stated that she was roused from her sleep by a rustling sound in her bedroom. When she opened her eyes, she reportedly saw the ethereal form of her deceased daughter slowly roaming about the room. Mary attempted to touch the apparition, at which point it disappeared. Undeterred, Mary Jane again turned to prayer, pleading for an opportunity to speak with her daughter and hopefully learn the truth of her passing. According to official Greenbrier County documents, her prayers were rewarded beyond her wildest dreams. According to Mary Hester, the spirit of her daughter spoke to her on 4 separate occasions. Each time, she revealed more about what had led to her death, or more accurately, her murder. Although many locals dismiss this as nothing more than the sad delusions of a grieving mother, some began having second thoughts. Mary Hester held fast to her story and was eventually able to convince her brother-in-law, Jonathan Hester, that she was speaking the truth. After comparing notes with Martha and Andrew Jones concerning the events on the morning of Zona's death, both Mary and Jonathan felt that they had enough evidence to make their case. The two traveled to the county seat of Lewisburg, where they related what they had learned to prosecuting attorney John Preston. Although initially skeptical, the sincerity and candor with which Mary Hester presented her case convinced Preston to at least look into the matter. Preston traveled to Meadow Bluff and first went to the local physician, Dr. Knapp. Mary Hester's version of events quickly started to gain credibility. Knapp opined that he had been prevented from completing a thorough examination of Zona's body by Trout Shue, and that there was every possibility that his official diagnosis was incorrect. After questioning several others in the Meadow Bluff district, John Preston came to the conclusion that there was, indeed, more to the case than first met the eye. To that end, he ordered the body of Zona Shue to be disinterred and a thorough autopsy performed. This sudden turn of events did not sit well with Trout Shue, who was alleged to have stated that he knew he would be arrested if the body was dug up, but that he could never be convicted. Words that would come back with a haunting of their own.
Oh, that sounds to me like something Chris Proudfoot would say.
On February 22, 1897, the casket containing the body of Zona Shue was removed from its earthly tomb and taken to the nearby Nichols Schoolhouse for the belated autopsy. Once inside, Dr. Knapp, along with Doctors Rupert and McClung and a 5-man jury, began their examination. Fortunately, the cold winter temperatures had kept the remains in a near-perfect state of preservation. During the post-mortem examination, it was discovered that Zona Shue's neck had been dislocated at a point between the first and second cerebral vertebrae, and the ligaments in the area had been torn and ruptured. Shue's windpipe had also been crushed from the front portion of the neck. Nothing else out of the ordinary was noted. Zona's body was returned to its resting place. Trout Shue was arrested and placed in the Greenbrier County Jail. The charge? First-degree murder. Even with his success in having Trout Shue arrested and imprisoned, prosecutor John Preston, along with attorney Henry Gilmer, knew that a conviction was far from certain. Although damning to his character, Shue's bragging about there being no way to convict him of Zona's murder was not without foundation. There was no known witnesses to the actual crime, no murder weapon, no fingerprints. All the evidence Preston had at his disposal, although powerful, was purely circumstantial. Shue was held in the small county jail cell near the courthouse while awaiting trial. He continued to brag to reporters and other visitors that he was confident he would be found innocent. Assigned to Shue's defense were Dr. William Parks Rucker and attorney James D. Gardner, the first African-American attorney to practice law in West Virginia Circuit Court. Greenbrier Circuit Court convened in Lewisburg on June 22, 1897. First case on the docket, the State of West Virginia versus Erasmus Stribling Shue. Although fully convinced of Mary Hester's veracity, John Preston was understandably leery about allowing her to take the stand. Even if the information Hester related to him and others did, in fact, come from a ghost or an apparition of some kind, it was still considered to be second-hand and therefore inadmissible. Preston also was understandably fearful that the nature of the story itself would damage Hester's credibility and quite possibly undermine an already uncertain case. Although the official trial documents have been lost to time, local as well as national newspapers recount that the first few days of the murder trial proceeded much like any other. Witnesses as well as experts were called, and the prosecution made the best possible case it could with the evidence at hand. The testimony of Dr. Knapp, as well as Martha and Andrew Jones, proved especially powerful. The sheet from Zona Shue's coffin, still stained an unmistakable shade of pink, was entered into evidence without objection. Once the prosecution rested, Shue's defense team swung into action. Much to Preston's deep dismay, attorney Rucker took it upon himself to call Mary Jane Hester to the stand. Preston must have known instinctively what Rucker had in mind. A perfect opportunity to embarrass both Hester and the prosecution, and perhaps cast just enough shadow of doubt over the entire case to preclude a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. However, if this was indeed Rucker's plan of attack, it backfired in spectacular fashion. On the stand, Mary Hester stated that the apparition of Zona Shue returned 3 more times on successive nights following its first fleeting appearance. Hester, desperate to uncover the truth, pleaded with the ghostly figure of her daughter to tell her what had really happened. Although initially reluctant to speak of the matter, the Greenbrier ghost eventually loosened its otherworldly tongue and unburdened its troubled soul. Zona's spirit allegedly stated that on the night of January 21, 1897, Trout Shue had returned home in a foul mood. Although still ailing, Zona had dinner waiting for him when he arrived. According to Hester's account of the ethereal tale, Shue was furious to find that Zona had cooked no meat that day and went into a frenzy. His verbal and physical tirade ended in the very life being strangled right out of his helpless wife, and Mary Hester proceeded to recount the entire tale for the jury and the record. What follows is drawn from verbatim transcripts of Mary Hester's actual testimony as recorded by local reporters.
I've heard that you had some dream or vision which led to this post-mortem examination.
It was no dream. She came back and told me. He was mad that she didn't have no meat cooked for supper. But she said that she had plenty, and said that she had butter and apple butter, apples, and named over 2 or 3 kinds of jellies. And she says, don't you think that he was mad? And just took down all my nice things and packed them away and just ruined them. She told me something about that meat every other night she came. She came 4 times. The second night, she told me that her neck was squeezed off at the first joint. It was just as she told me.
Now, Mrs. Heaster, this sad affair was very particularly impressed upon your mind. There was not a moment during your waking hours that you did not dwell upon it?
Oh, no, sir. And there's not yet either.
And was this not a dream founded upon your distressed condition of mind?
No, sir. It was no dream. For I was as wide awake as I ever was.
Then, if not a dream or dreams, what do you call it?
Well, I prayed to the Lord that she might come back and tell me what had happened. And I prayed that she might come herself and tell on him.
Do you think that you actually saw her in flesh and blood?
Well, yes, sir, I do. I told them the very dress that she was killed in, and when she went to leave me, she turned her head completely around and looked at me like she wanted to know all about it. Last night she was there, she told me that she did everything she could do, and I'm satisfied that she did do all that, too.
Now, Mrs. Heaster, don't you know that these visions, as you termed them or described them, were nothing more or less than 4 dreams founded upon your distress?
No, I don't know it. The Lord sent her to me to tell it. I was the only friend that she knew she could tell and put any of her confidence in, and I was the nearest one to her.
Mrs. Heaster, are you positively sure that these are not 4 dreams?
Yes, sir, it was not a dream. I don't dream when I'm wide awake, to be sure. And I know I saw her right there with me.
Now, I would like, if I could, to get you to say that these were 4 dreams and not 4 visions or appearances of your daughter in flesh and blood.
I am not going to say that, for I am not going to lie.
Then you insist that she actually appeared in flesh and blood to you upon 4 different occasions?
Yes, sir.
Did she not have any other conversation with you other than upon the matter of her death?
I just wanted the particulars about her death, and I got them.
When she came, did you touch her?
Yes, sir. I got up on my elbows and reached out. She was just like she was when she left this world. And it was just after I went to bed, and I wanted her to come and talk to me. And she did.
Perhaps sensing that his attempt at discrediting the prosecution was going horribly awry, Locker soon brought his questioning to an end. The damage, however, had been done. Although the testimony given by Mary Heaster was unorthodox, to say the very least, the fact that it had been entered into evidence by the defense and not the prosecution left Judge J.M. McWhorter with little choice but to make reference to it in his final instructions to the jury. It took the jury just over 1 hour to reach its decision. The verdict: guilty of murder in the first degree, but with a recommendation for mercy. This meant that Trout Shue was to spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Apparently, many residents of Greenbrier County felt mercy was too good for Shue. 2 days later, as arrangements were made to move Shue to his final residence, an angry lynch mob formed in a nearby field. Only diplomatic action on the part of the county sheriff and quick thinking on the part of his deputy kept Shue from meeting the noose. After being hidden away in the nearby woods until things cooled down, Shue was taken from Lewisburg and transported to the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville. Records state that he died there in 1900 and, like other indigent convicts, was buried in an unmarked grave in a potter's field. Today, the final resting place of Erasmus Shue has also been lost to memory. Opinion was divided as to whether or not Mary Heaster actually was visited by the spirit of her murdered daughter. Many, knowing Hester's reputation as a God-fearing and honest woman, were willing to take her at her word. Others speculated that Hester's tale was nothing more than a brilliant ruse on her part to reignite interest in her daughter's death, a ruse played to absolute perfection. Despite public skepticism, Mary Jane Heaster never wavered. She died in 1916, having never changed or recanted version of events. Did Mary Jane Hester actually receive vital evidence from the apparition of Zona Shue? Did the spirit of Zona Shue return from its ethereal plane in order to help see justice through to its proper conclusion? Could Mary Hester simply have been dreaming, as the prosecution suggested? Could she have been hallucinating? Or is it possible that Mary Hester, convinced of Shue's guilt, but left with no other recourse, concocted a scheme so fantastic and successful that it simply could not be ignored? It is very unlikely that we will ever receive a satisfactory answer to these questions. But who knows? Who knows?
I believe we already have. I think it happened. Do you? I have one more story, but I haven't listened to it. It's 18 minutes long, but I haven't listened to it, so I don't know if it's like the same exact story being just retold. It's from the Appalachian Storyteller. Do you like this kind of story? I kind of like the paranormal stuff, and to find out that there's places where the paranormal has actually crossed paths with the true crime is just, it's fascinating to me. It is just interesting. So, alrighty. I thank y'all for being here, and ignoring my spots that I want to scratch right off my face now because they're itching. Don't scratch. The doctor said when they start to blister, I'm not supposed to pop the blisters. I'm supposed to let them absorb back into my skin, because he says that's the medication working and the white blood cells killing the medication. I don't know. But anyway, he says don't pop them. So, but all right. Do something nice for someone. Thank you for being here. Please hit the thumbs up. Do something nice for someone, even if it's just be the reason they smile, and get Locker. See you tomorrow.